Well, hello. All right, this is my very first time ever doing anything like this. So I have no idea exactly how it'll go. We will see. I've done a test run ahead of time, but we will see exactly how good or how badly this goes. But I see it looks as if we're up on YouTube and we are ready to go there. And it looks as if we are up on Facebook and ready to go there. Um, it looks like Sarah's having some trouble hearing. Um, out of curiosity, can the rest of you hear me? Okay, okay, huh? Sarah, I'm not quite sure exactly what you might be doing. It's possible maybe there's some sound settings on your computer. Um, I'm not entirely certain, to be honest. Hello, Maddie. Hey. All right, just got somebody on Facebook. And we got somebody from Indio, California as well. Hello. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. And I was talking with some of my friends who have been helping me through this and helping me know what to do here. And I was telling them, I'm like, I'm going to have to make sure that the the perfect doesn't become the enemy of the good because I can be very much a perfectionist, and that is something we'll kind of touch on a little bit today. But that is definitely something I'm just going to have to let go, and we'll see how it goes, and it will either go really well or it will not. And either one is going to be something that I'm just going to give up to God, and we'll see how it goes. So I am going to be reading from a script today. I do have a little bit of a scripted thing that I want to give to everybody, but I am going to keep an eye on the chat as we go, and I will definitely pause and ask for feedback and get ideas and put things up there as we go. So glad to see everybody here. We have a couple of different people that I know, and it looks like we're ready to go. So hello to one and all. Welcome to the inaugural first live episode of the Trauma Informed Church Kid podcast. So, some of you may know me already, either online or through in person interactions. I'm actually genuinely excited to be starting up this podcast, which has been a project on my head and my heart for quite a while now. So finally, after quite some time and back and forth on if this would be valuable or not, here we are. I'll leave the final determination of its value up to you guys, whoever is watching, whoever is listening, because the experiences of you all is genuinely why I feel the need to do something like this. I've walked alongside enough people in my life who have experienced hurt at the hands of theology and church leaders, and I think at the end of the day, I feel a need for another voice out there to help the hurting, or perhaps even to help those who live and work with the hurting and sometimes just don't know what to say. So, if that's you in any way, thank you very much for showing up. Whether you stick it out the whole way or whether you just listen here and there, you are welcomed and you are loved. So, it's worth just kind of asking the question right off the bat, why another voice? I mean, there are plenty of podcasts out there and plenty of other people with ideas and opinions. So why just add to the noise? I mean, honestly, that question is pretty fair, particularly for someone like myself, a white, straight, and in many other ways privileged person. I hope that those facts alone aren't turn offs for you, and that along the journey we both take, we can learn to listen to each other, be open to challenging perspectives, and to freely give compassion and grace to each other and to everyone we meet. But these ideas are just kind of abstract and vague. Let's drill down to specifics. And the first specifics I want to give are some autobiographical details about me, who I am, why I want to do this, and hopefully help you to get to know the heart behind the voice. So, um, just want to touch base real quick with the chat. I see Phil in there. I see Carrie in there. I see Vicky in there. I see Sarah and Maddie in there. So thank you guys for showing up. I don't know if anyone is actually on X right now. I am taking a look to see if there is anything. Yes, there is something up there. So, hey, cool, good. But nevertheless, if you are on X as well, welcome. I can't actually see you right now, but I will keep an eye on that as well. So, oh yes, hello, designs by Maria Amelia. Good to see you too. So, let me go ahead and get back to things here. So, again, a little bit of autobiographical details for everybody. So I've been a lifelong church kid, and that's kind of where the title of the podcast comes from. I grew up in the Midwest, going to a building that had wooden pews, hymnals, stained glass windows, an organist, and pretty much every other stereotype you could think of for a country church. When I was 7, as nearly as I can remember, I did what is known as an altar call, did something called inviting Jesus into my heart. For those of you who know what that means, it basically just means like a moment of decision of salvation. And that was like really big in the church and the culture in which I grew up. And from that point onward, I pretty much had the church building as kind of a second home. We would go to Sunday school and watch some lovely older lady do flannel graphs, stay after service for potlucks in the church basement, go home briefly before coming back for Sunday night service, and then come back again for Wednesday evening service. I went to youth group retreats and revivals and mission trips and lock ins, did Bible quizzing and sword drills, and in general participated in all the things that a quote good church kid would do. I got baptized sometime around 13 or 14 and wound up going to a Christian college as well. I graduated, got married to someone from that college, of course, and we moved out to Colorado and built a life together. Now we have one child, a daughter in early elementary school. My wife is a teacher and a published author of a very wonderful children's book. It actually won't come out until spring of 2026, but I can promise you, you will get author plugs from me for my wife. But anyway, so my wife is a teacher and a published author. And we have a little West Highland White Terrier named Winston, as well as our newest edition, which literally we just got Tuesday of this week, a black Frenchie named Pippin. And if any of you are recognizing the reference there of Pippin, yes, that is from Lord of the Rings. Any of you who are watching live, yes, behind me, this is the sword of Aragorn and Juriel. And yes, these are all of my little figurines that I've collected from my years in college and beyond of Lord of the Rings. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, so that's where the name comes from. Oh, Josh. Wow. Really good to see you, man. This is somebody who I know in real life as well and is one of my absolute best friends. I love this guy so much. But also, hello, Tamika. Thank you for showing up as well on Facebook. So, anyway, just to kind of continue some things about me, I love mountain biking, college basketball, go Illini, and really any activity outdoors. Being out in the nature, being out in nature in the wild, that's my happy place. Either that or watching British TV with my wife while drinking tea. I am a licensed mental health therapist in private practice, specializing in depression, anxiety, and trauma. And I come at that from an attachment and somatic lens, working with adolescents, adults, and couples. Um, and overall, I'm just somebody who is nerdy enough to find both neuroscience and Leviticus just ripping good reads. So that kind of tells you a little bit about me. I'm definitely, oh, hey, Sam. Nice to see you too. Um, so that's me in a nutshell. I mean, at least as far as as it regards my personal history. There's nothing too special or noteworthy about that history apart from its privilege, as I noticed earlier. And I kind of want to just acknowledge and own that privilege and all of the value and beauty that I believe it confers on my life and, yes, also the world at large. I also want to acknowledge and own all the ways that a story like mine can, and for many people has, cause significant distress, depression, and even abuse or trauma. Because that story of mine has a bit of a dark side. I went to high school in the height of purity culture, which also coincided with the left behind craze and fears about the rapture. And I was also raised in a home and a church environment that was pretty strict and very focused on um, doing the right thing, which again, I see that as being very much a blessing. And it also comes with a curse as well. And I didn't realize any really a lot of how that affected me at the time. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that the denomination that I attended was from a branch of Protestantism that was really focused on holiness and purity. So that was just kind of part of the water I swam in. So I didn't really notice what was the effects of that. However, as I've gotten older and I've kind of stepped out of that bubble somewhat, I've realized that there have been significant ways in which that theological and personal history has shaped my view of God, my view of myself, and my view of anyone who doesn't, quote, fit into that fairly narrow band of belief experience. Over the years, I have realized that largely because of that history, I continue to battle intense scrupulosity about perceived and real moral failings, existential dread about how God sees me, and a hair trigger for judging others. That personal insecurity has led to a protective part of me that presents as biting sarcasm, anger, and explosiveness. And that is something that I continue to fight and struggle with daily in my relationship with my daughter, as well as other people that I come into close contact with. But I want to be really clear. I want to neither blame my upbringing because it was pretty much just primarily the soil out of which many of my own choices grew, nor do I want to make this whole thing about me. I will certainly be very vulnerable about my own struggles as we continue on, but I want to spend this time and space amplifying other voices besides mine, the voices of those who have seen far more rotten fruit born out of their experiences than I have. And I do want to just pause for a second and say, "Hey Trey, glad to see you." This is another brother that I spend a lot of time with online, so he's a good friend. So overall, all those other people whose voices I want to amplify, who have seen far more rotten fruit, that's one of the two primary reasons for the existence of this podcast. First of all, to explore with honesty, humility, and contrition the dark side of growing up as a church kid. My goal is neither to defend with apologetics, nor is it to bash and belittle. My goal is to confess, repent, and repair. My story as a church kid matters because it kickstarted this whole journey. But my story really isn't why I'm here, and it isn't why I don't think any of us are here. We're here because sometimes well meaning people have ways of reading the Bible that create massive dissonance with being a healthy person. We're here because sometimes the faith community will exclude and other and turn their back on people that have invested a lifetime of labor, of love, and sacrifice in them. We're here because religious institutions have protected and platformed and defended abusers and used the Bible or the good fruit of ministry to justify their practices. We're here because sometimes people who grew up as, quote, good church kids have been so sheltered that exposure to the world rocks their sense of self, and they don't know how to reconcile and live with a faith that was both deeply felt and deeply held, but is clearly built on quicksand. Overall, we're here because people who bear the name of Christ in the world have aligned themselves with the kingdoms of the world and not the kingdom of God. And it's pretty safe to say that they have sold their moral authority, which is their birthright, for a bowl of political stew. So that's why I'm here. And that's why this podcast exists. Now, of course, like all cases of hurt and harm, events like that, like everything I've described, occur on a spectrum of severity. And there really isn't an objective definition of spiritual trauma and religious abuse. However, there are three indicators that persist as defining features throughout all the stories that I've encountered, both personal and professional. First of which, lingering negative effects beyond the event itself. Second, which substantially impact one's ability to function. And third, in ways that feel out of the person's direct control. So, if you have ever felt like or noticed other people in your life who have encountered lingering negative effects from church experiences beyond their existence in that space, which substantially impact their ability to function in ways that feel outside of their or your direct control, it's probably safe to say that you've experienced some spiritual trauma or religious abuse. And if that has happened to anyone you know or to you, I just want to make sure that you guys hear me and know that that is not the way that God intended for it to be. And I'm deeply, deeply sorry. And that's why I want to do this podcast is to acknowledge those voices, to amplify those voices and those experiences, and to make it clear that anything that has happened in that regard came from the enemy. But I don't want to come at this with easy answers because that's the niche that I've carved out for myself, both professionally and personally, to come alongside those who have been hurt or traumatized in God's name and to help them find recovery and healing. But specifically, my area of experience has been focused on helping people who are ready to leave their old experience of the church behind, but who aren't yet ready to leave God behind. These people that I've encountered and worked with, they want to be faithful to the text or to their tradition, but their experience has so soured them on what that phrase means that they don't even think it's possible anymore. So the only options they see out there are to either reject completely anything to do with God or just to sit in misery, disagreeing with everything their ears hear and their eyes see in the faith community. A bit like Gandhi, they find themselves compelled by Christ, but repelled by his building, repelled by his sacred texts, and repelled by his people. So for those people, my hope has been, and what I've been trying to do with my professional and personal life, has been to walk alongside those people through the valley of the shadow of deconstruction to help them find resurrection and life again on the other side. And really, ultimately, that's why this podcast exists. I am a trauma informed church kid who is passionate about making one thing happen: reconstructing religion for the hurting through theology that doesn't hurt. I have almost 20 years of mental health experience, a lifetime of being soaked in the church world, and hundreds of hours of time in session with people who have experienced church hurt of various kinds. I come into this armed with a background in education and teaching, as well as a lifelong voracious appetite for reading and learning and growing. And my hope is to leverage all of that into a theology podcast that doesn't cause too much hurt either to your head or to your heart. And I want to pause here for a second and just acknowledge a couple of people in the chat. By the way, hello, Brandon. Good to see you too. So, that's kind of the background of why I'm here, why I'm doing this, and a little bit about me. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what what this is actually going to look like practically in this podcast. So I really want to make the content of this podcast accessible and tangible, even when it gets really nerdy. And it will get really nerdy at times. So I want to kind of do a few things. For one, I will try to keep all of my solo podcasts, which is going to be like the standard episode that I will do, to about 30 minutes, give or take. And because I want it to be bite sized portions. So, of necessity, that's not going to answer everyone's questions. So, I beg your indulgence and forgiveness and welcome feedback when I don't treat something as deeply or as carefully as you would like. I will almost certainly get to the depth later, either in a later episode in a series or perhaps in some kind of Q&R format. And by the way, our Q&R episodes are going to be live as well. So my plan is for about once every 2 months or so, we're just going to kind of take a look back at some of the things we've covered over the last month or so, and I'll do another live episode like this that will have um, a chance for people to ask questions, and then we can do a live back and forth right here to be able to get some questions and give a response in there. So that is something that will happen throughout. Make sure you tune in to those live podcast or sorry, those live Q&R episodes on the same platforms as this when they happen. And I'm also going to try to get interviews from time to time with a few significant figures in the world of both theology and trauma. And those episodes are certainly going to run a little bit longer, the Q&R and the interviews, just because of the format. But I'm trying to keep that to about an hour, and then my podcasts to or my solo episodes to about 30 minutes. And in general, though, I hope it's going to be valuable to hear from other perspectives and other voices as well, um, especially scholars. To know this isn't just the ramblings of a nerdy Lord of the Rings obsessed weirdo. So, and in general, the biggest format question that I wanted to address today is I want to kind of explore the dark side of being a church kid in a unique way. I want to kind of walk through the entire Christian scriptures from start to finish, including the deuterocanonical text, the things that, for various reasons, just don't make it into the normal Protestant Bible. Along the way, we're going to be highlighting two things as we walk through the Christian scriptures. Number one, the ways in which those texts have been used to cause hurt. And number two, a less hurtful and hopefully more faithful reading. So, to reconstruct the second one, we'll focus on big picture narrative themes and design patterns, as Tim Mackey from the Bible Project would say. We're going to focus on those things so that we want to try to find that in there an image of God that is fiercely in love with his creation and utterly committed to redeeming and restoring it from all the enemies who would seek to destroy it. And that is going to be a fairly high level, big picture flyby. So, in order to kind of summarize the content, make it as accessible as possible, I'm going to end each episode with a wrap up that puts everything that was said into a sort of kind of like explain it to me like I'm five presentation. So, as the podcast goes on, I will break up the walkthrough of the scriptures with little mini episodes dedicated entirely to what I'm calling the how of hurt. These will be episodes that will step aside from the Bible and look at descriptions of exactly how trauma affects the body, the heart, the mind, and the soul. And I'm going to pay special attention to the ways in which that works out in a religious setting. So, and I just want to pause and take a look um, at the chat here and acknowledge a few things. Sorry, guys. This is my first experience doing a live thing with live chat, and I'm using Riverside for my primary studio, but apparently the chats don't show up in there, so I have to kind of have two two things going on at the same time. So, all right. So, to wrap it all up and to return to our original question, why another voice? Why my voice? So, there are a lot of podcasts out there about deconstructing religion and faith. And there are a lot out there focused on apologetics for the faith or for the faithful. However, very few are focused on building back religion or faith after deconstruction. None that I know of have the experience and training that I do. On this journey, I hope to leverage my communication skills as an educator and a therapist, my card carrying membership in the quote Bible Nerd Club, and my experience as a church kid to offer a third path that is neither apologetics nor deconstruction, a trauma informed, biblically grounded, and whole person approach to re experiencing God in the Bible. Because of the subjectivity of trauma, I can't promise how people will receive the content of this podcast. But as I tell my clients many times, healing from trauma doesn't come from avoiding triggers, it comes from building resilience from a place of safety. I don't want to make a comfortable space here, but I do hope to facilitate a brave space where the safety of the vulnerable is prioritized. And finally, I want to use this podcast to amplify the voices of the hurt and the hurting, to begin what Meiko Nagasawa calls a long repentance. And that's something that we all who come from a church background need to participate in, whether we have individually caused trauma, and we probably have even without being aware of it, or not. It's something that we all need to confess, we all need to repent of, and we all need to do better with. So, in conclusion, I've always resonated with the words of Abba Alonius, one of the Desert Fathers. If I had not destroyed myself completely, I would not have been able to rebuild and reshape myself again. And my prayer is that I can be a part of that journey of rebuilding and reshaping for anyone who needs and desires it. In brief, to help reconstruct religion for the hurting with theology that doesn't hurt. I welcome you all on this journey with me, and I look forward to discovering where it takes us. So, that is pretty much all I had that I wanted to make sure that I covered today. I'm kind of shifting over here so I can focus on the chat. I would love to see if there's any specific questions or thoughts or anything in particular that anybody else had who was watching on the live stream or watching in the chat. I promise I will get better at this as time goes on. Because there's an awful lot of these things that I just don't know exactly how how to do yet. So I'm learning as we go. Ooh, Carrie, who is another podcaster whose podcast I've been on and done some episodes about sacrifice before. She asked a really good question. Um, she said, and this is coming out of YouTube for anybody who's on there. She said, any resources to suggest to begin with? Um, yes, there are many of them. I'd say a couple of really good authors are Catherine Escobar. She has a really good book called Faith Shift that is excellent for people who are trying to kind of recover and rediscover their faith in the middle of following up with spiritual trauma and religious abuse. Another really good author to be aware of is Diane Langberg. She has an excellent book called Redeeming Power that is all about trying to re- redeem and recover an understanding of what power should look like compared to what it always has looked like in the church. So Diane Langberg, Catherine Escobar, um, and also there are two really good books about the way in which institutional churches have structures that cause trauma sometimes. One of them is Scott McKnight, a church called Tove. Tov is the Hebrew word for good, and it's an excellent, excellent book that gives some of his own history um, with. I'm gonna. I think it was Willow Creek Church. I could be wrong. Please don't quote me on that. But it was one of these like famous mega churches, um, and it exposes it. He talks a little bit about that, and then he also talks about kind of reconstructing what it should look like. Here's what a Tov church should look like. Another really good institutional resource is Chuck DeGroat. When narcissism comes to church, there's it's another one of those like here are all the red flags to watch out for, and here are the things that we need to be building better with in our churches. So that's just the quick and dirty ones that I would hit off the top when it comes to trauma specifically. So that's probably where I'd start. Vicky, Vicky, that's an excellent question you asked. She's also watching on YouTube. She asked, "How fast or slow will you go on the Genesis to Revelation overview?" Thank you so much for asking that, Vicky. I don't know that I can give you a straight, direct answer. I've been working for the last couple of weeks on putting together my Genesis 1 through 3, um, Genesis 1 through 3 kind of write ups. And again, trying to keep to under or right around 30 minutes and looking at these larger, big picture narrative themes, design patterns, and things that kind of build a better picture of God than we've encountered sometimes. And right now, I'm probably going to look at doing 1 through 3 in 4 installments, like one for chapter 1, one for chapter 2, and then 2 for chapter 3. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of how fast it's going to go. This is not a short thing. This is a long haul. And it's something that will we will need to kind of do unpack slowly, but I don't want to do it too slowly. I want to kind of really be able to zoom out and not zoom in too much and get too bogged down in the details. So chances are, just so you know, I do think that Genesis 1 through 3 in particular, but 1 through 11 broadly, are super, super important for understanding the whole Bible. So I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time on them. It's definitely not going to be one episode per chapter at all. Like there will be times where going through certain portions of Exodus, for example, where they duplicate the instructions for the tabernacle, um, where I'm just going to say, okay, now we're going to cover 12 chapters at a time. So, and then there are other portions, like for example Leviticus, which is my peak nerdery. I love that book. I've really started to fall in love with that book over the last 7 years. And that one, I'm sorry, we're just going to get deep and we're going to get detailed, and it's just going to have to happen. And I'm going to apologize in advance and just keep doing it. So, bottom line answer to your question, Vicky, is I don't know. We'll find out together. But I am trying to keep it zoomed out as much as possible, unless there's something really seriously worth zooming in. And by the way, hello to Joshua Sherman. He's another good friend of mine who I've come to know online through the podcasting world an awful lot. And so he's another excellent person that I'm very, very, very glad to know. So, a couple more questions. Carrie also asked, "What all social spaces can you be found in?" I love that the other one who has a podcast is asking all the good podcast questions. I really do. So thank you, Carrie. um, so obviously, we have a discussion group on Facebook. It's called Trauma Informed Church Kids, plural. So you can go ahead and find that on you can go ahead and find that discussion group and be able to participate and dive deeper into some of the stuff that we cover on here. I will also, whenever we do a live stream, I'm going to live stream to the same platforms: X, YouTube, and Facebook every time. I'm going to try to see if I can do it on Instagram. I am really an Instagram idiot, so I don't know really how to do that. We'll figure it out. But for now, those are the live stream platforms. Carrie, our X, Twitter, and sorry, X is Twitter, X, YouTube, and Facebook. And then there's the Facebook group. The podcast itself is going to be hosted by Podbean. And Tanika asks a really good question too. Will this be available on Apple Podcasts? So yes, if you go to churchkidpod.podbean.com, I will put it in the chat right now, actually. And um, do, 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 do. That is kind of the HQ for the podcast. That is going to have on there. It has a list of all the places it's available. So to directly answer your question, Tamika, let me make sure that I can get it correct here. I am on Apple Podcast. I'm also on YouTube as a podcast, also on Podbean app, also on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Samsung, Podchaser, and Boomplay. So there you go. Plenty of options for you. So thank you very much for asking that. Cults and Overcomers asks a question. How do you start to get over a cult you were in dealing with religious trauma, along with so much different types of abuse? Yeah. Um, this is I'm really glad that you asked that question because for two reasons. For one, because it highlights the limitations of this podcast, and it also highlights a distinction that I want to make that's really important as well. And then I'm going to answer the question. The first one is that untangling yourself from religious abuse and spiritual trauma is a lifelong, hard, deeply painful, very difficult thing. It is absolutely without any doubt 100% not a just pray it away or just read the Bible more or just um, dive into church more. It's not it's there are no easy answers at all. And so I strongly and highly encourage every single person who feels like they've experienced that to be able to get into a relationship with a licensed therapist. And I say licensed therapist intentionally because there are people who are uh, either biblical counselors or uh, so biblical counselor is somebody who has some training in counseling but is not licensed by the state and is not governed by their supervising bodies. They work inside the church specifically from a explicitly biblical religious perspective to be able to help people who need help. And I'm just going to say right off the bat, that is wonderful. They do wonderful work. There is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It also is not a good choice for healing from spiritual trauma and religious abuse. What is a better option is a licensed therapist, somebody who is um, licensed in the best practices of mental health work broadly, that adheres to a code of ethics, like from the American Counseling Association or some other national organization, like I do. And those people are people who help, who are there to help people find their own way out of their problems in a way that aligns with the client's values. So, a licensed therapist might be a Christian like me, or they might not, like somebody else. And it's really important to, as part of the recovery process from spiritual trauma and religious abuse, it's really important to be able to, for a time, be mad at God, to and maybe even for indefinite time to be angry at God, to be really upset at what he allowed to happen, and to voice those things out loud, and to make it, and to really wrestle and get your hands and your heart dirty with all that has happened to you. And that's not always possible within a church setting. And so that's why it's really helpful to find a licensed therapist who has the training and the experience to be able to work with those things. So that's where I would say for cults and overcomers, that would be the first place to start, is finding a licensed therapist who can help with that. And the other thing that I would also delineate here is you'll notice I said spiritual trauma or religious abuse, because to me, those are different things. Um, Religious abuse is something that happens at the institutional level. It happens kind of from the top down with the power structures, permission, and leveraging the authority of the power structure to be able to cause that this specific harm. So if someone feels like they've been, you know, disfellowshipped or isolated, or in some other ways, had their the power of the institution leveraged against them in an abusive way, that would be religious abuse. Um, Spiritual trauma, on the other hand, is very similar but distinct in my mind. It's something that happens much more personally, much more intra personally. Um, it's a lot more subjective. It becomes a lot more fuzzy to actually say what's trauma and what's not. Um, and that's very much a one-on-one with a therapist discussion and figure out what that looks like. And again, keeping in mind the three kind of major features of trauma that I talked about. Those are the things that cause um, that kind of experience. And the difference between regular trauma and spiritual trauma is that spiritual trauma tends to be something that feels like it has God's name or God's voice or God's permission structure attached to it. And that could look like theology that just really messes you up. It could look like um, just situations in a small group where it feels like I trusted these people and I was vulnerable with them and confessed things to them, and then they turned it around and used it against me. There are lots of different ways that that can look like. It's really hard to kind of be exhaustive in a short format like this, but um, it's a different kind of thing than religious abuse, and therefore requires a different kind of response. So that is just something I do want to kind of make sure that that people understand. There's a distinction there. Taking a look at some of the chat here. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Designs by Maria Amelia on YouTube said, I think it's important to speak to those who can relate as well, edifying and encouraging by reminding them that there is light at end. God loves you, never forgetting that. Yeah, that's a belief that I have, and that's why I do this. That's why I work in this field. That's why I work in this job and with these people, is because it breaks my heart. It hurts a lot to see the ways in which the name of God has been used to cause harm and to cause hurt. And I think there's really nothing more insidious than that. Um, and I can believe myself that there is light at the end, but I just want to say it's okay for people who don't believe that. It's okay if people are just can't hear that right now and think that that's just a bunch of BS. I hear that, and I'm okay with that, because my goal in doing this is not to beat people over the head with the light that I see. My goal in doing this is to provide an alternative, in a different perspective, a different way of looking at things, and just let people engage with that as they will, in their time, in their way, with their support structure, and the way in which they feel the safest. Because again, safety is everything in recovery from trauma. And I am not keeping people safe by either A, taking away their agency and telling them what they have to believe, or B, trying to beat them over the head with a particular point of view. So that's why it's really important for me to take this as a, here's the way I see it, here's the way I have walked this. I would love for you to walk it with me at whatever pace you want. And that's kind of that's why I do this. All right. I'm going to answer two more questions here, one from Sarah, one from Carrie. And then I think I'll go ahead and wrap up this little inaugural episode here. Thank you so much for all the questions, by the way. I really appreciated that from people. Um, yes, Sarah said, and I assume you're including those who have had a great experience in church growing up and then got blindsided by a bad experience in adulthood. Thank you very, very much for saying that, Sarah. You're absolutely 100% right. Um, Trauma, church hurt happens at all different times, in all different places, in all different ways. It is not just a childhood thing. I myself felt no experience of church hurt really that I can really pinpoint with any clarity when I was growing up. And it's only since I've kind of looked back at like the fruit of that tree that I've said, ooh, there's a lot of really good fruit and a lot of rotten fruit. And and I'm and it's important to kind of look at both and acknowledge they both exist. And you're right, Sarah. There may very well be people who have, a good experience in church growing up and then feel blindsided when they get older. Um, that has its own unique problems that come along with that. So yes. Um, and then Carrie says, will you be covering things like helping people to distinguish who is a good therapist and how to find and how to choose one? Yes. I think those kind of side quests episodes of, like, for instance, the ones that I'm calling the how of hurt, those are going to be really good spaces for people to pay attention to, because there will be a lot of information in there about how to look for a therapist, what to look for when you're looking for a therapist, when you're doing your first appointment with a therapist, what to pay attention to, what somatic signals to listen to, and which ones to kind of allow um, to in shorthand to to respond directly to, and which ones to kind of hit pause and then bring up later. So anyway, all that to say, I don't want to get into that too much here, but yes, I would say as an answer to your question, Carrie, highlight specifically the how of hurt episodes, and they will have a lot of really good information about trauma and about therapy and about how to handle and navigate that. So all right. This is probably where I want to kind of tie it off right now. Not, A, not to overstay my welcome. Um, B, because you can probably hear my speech impediment is kind of acting up a little bit. And C, because I really want to make sure that I kind of keep this at a digestible amount for everybody. So, again, thank you everybody for showing up. Thank you so much for all the um, great comments that you gave. And what I'm going to try to do for this is I will edit the audio tomorrow, and then I'll try to see if I can submit it to be uploaded. It probably will show up on Podbean first, and then we'll kind of slowly roll out to those other platforms like Apple and YouTube and Spotify and those kind of things. So if you don't see it right away, that's fine. But my hope, my goal is to have a Friday recording day and then a Sunday release day. This is my first time doing this. We will feel it out and see what happens. So it's possible we may have some hitches and problems along the way, but we'll see. We'll see. But my goal is to try to shoot for once a week as a release. Um, if there's times where I'm not going to do that, I will try to post that up in the Facebook discussion group in particular as the primary way to kind of communicate with people there. So all right, everybody. Thank you so much. Um, I know I said at the beginning you are welcomed and you are loved, and I really do mean that. Every single person here is an image of God, is loved by God, and to the best of my ability is loved by me. So thank you.